Sometime near the end of 2025, a document drops that is going to chart the course for basically 1/5 of all humanity. Now, this isn't just some dry economic plan. Think of it as a blueprint for a superpower's next big evolution, a strategic answer to a world that's, well, pretty chaotic right now. This is the story of China's 15th five-year plan, a hugely ambitious, high-stakes roadmap designed to navigate the turbulent decade ahead and completely reshape a nation by 2030.
It's clear that the next plan will still put strong emphasis on building modern industries and achieving greater tech self-reliance. They talked about keeping a reasonable share of manufacturing in the overall industrial structure. It's also a sign that Beijing wants to solidify its position as a global manufacturing powerhouse. They also highlighted the need to strengthen original innovation and make breakthroughs in core technologies. At the same time, there is a big emphasis on driving up domestic demand and boosting consumption.
And that really is the central question, isn't it? With so much volatility out there, with strategic competition heating up, trying to plan for the long term can feel almost impossible. And yet, that is exactly what this new plan is trying to do. It's a carefully calculated answer to this very question, and today we're going to decode it piece by piece. So let's jump in. Alright, here's our game plan for breaking this all down. We're going to start with the foundation of this new blueprint, and then we'll get into a really crucial shift in their whole innovation strategy. We'll decode this futuristic-sounding concept at its core, new quality productive forces. After that, we'll look at the domestic engine that's supposed to power it all, and the global realities that are shaping it. And finally, we'll tackle the big questions that are still hanging in the air. Okay, so to really get where China's headed, we first have to understand where it's been. See, this new plan isn't being built from scratch. It's a direct evolution from the last one. It builds on the successes, but more importantly, it's learning from the challenges. And the foundation they're building on is, well, it's immense. This slide here shows some of the staggering progress made just between 2021 and 2025. I mean, look at these numbers. Total R&D investment, it's soared by nearly 50%. The value coming out of high-tech manufacturing jumped 42%. And get this, China's researchers now account for a third of the world's most cited scientific papers. This isn't just a small step up, it's a huge leap, and it really sets the stage for what's coming next. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because this table reveals a major pivot. This isn't just more of the same, it's a fundamental shift in strategy. You can see the main priority moves from just technological innovation to the more practical industrial modernization. And the whole economic anchor is no longer real estate, but this new idea of new quality productive forces. The goal is changing from simply inventing the future to actually mass producing it. But here's the twist. For a plan this big, there's a lot it doesn't say. The documents that have come out so far are, as analysts point out, mostly qualitative. They set a direction, a philosophy. But the hard numbers, the specific GDP growth targets, the detailed budgets for all these ambitious projects, they're still under wraps. And this tells you a lot about the plan's nature. It's a compass, not a GPS. It gives a clear direction, but leaves a lot of flexibility for the journey ahead. So let's dig into how this new direction is really taking shape. This next idea is, you could argue, the single most important strategic change in the entire document. It's a pivot that's born out of necessity, it's a response to a global tech race that's getting more intense, and the internal need to move beyond an old economic model that's kind of run its course. So the last plan was all about 0 to 1, that spark of invention, the big breakthrough in the lab. Think of it like discovering fire for the first time. This new plan, though, is laser-focused on 1 to 100, taking that technology, converting it, and scaling it up. It's not about discovering fire anymore. It's about building a global network of power plants. The focus is shifting from the lab bench to the factory floor to the supply chain and out into the global market. And this quote from the source material just says it all, doesn't it? The message is crystal clear. Yeah, original research is still important, but the new benchmark for success is whether an innovation can be turned into real, tangible industrial, economic, and strategic value on a massive scale. The decisive impact, as they see it, comes from industrialization. Okay, so this brings us to the engine that's designed to power that whole 1 to 100 scaling idea. It's a phrase you see over and over again in the planning documents, new quality productive forces. I mean, it sounds futuristic, right? Almost like something out of science fiction. But what does it actually mean for the economy? At its core, it's really about a fundamental upgrade. It's a state-led strategy to get away from the old economic drivers like real estate and basic manufacturing, and instead to build an economy around industries that are high-tech, high-efficiency, and high-quality. For companies, this means a massive push to automate and innovate. And for workers, it signals a huge demand for new skills in things like data science, advanced manufacturing, and engineering. And when they say industries of the future, they are not kidding. Just look at this list, taken right from the planning recommendations. We're talking about quantum technology, biomanufacturing, even nuclear fusion power, embodied AI, 6G, brain-computer interfaces. This isn't just a 5-year plan. This is a vision for the next several decades. The goal here is to lay the groundwork now to lead in the technologies that are going to define the middle of the 21st century. So why this really intense focus on building these new industries right now? Why the pivot inward? The answer really lies in the plan's very sober assessment of the global economic landscape. The strategy is pretty clear. If you can't rely on the rest of the world for growth, you have to build a more powerful engine at home. This chart tells a really clear story. Global growth is slowing down. You see, the forecasts for the US and the Eurozone are hovering below 2%. And even China, while it's still growing faster, is projected to see its own growth cool down. So the takeaway for Beijing is pretty stark. In a world where economic momentum is fading, relying on exports is a risky bet. The domestic market has to become the primary engine. And that brings us back to those missing official targets. While Beijing hasn't put a number on it, international analysts are estimating that growth during this plan's period will probably fall somewhere in this 4 to 5% range. And this represents a new reality. It's a shift away from just breakneck speed towards what the plan calls high-quality development. Slower maybe, but hopefully more sustainable and resilient growth powered from within. Now, this domestic pivot isn't just about economics. It's also a direct strategic response to the world outside. The 10th Five-Year Plan is a document that was written for a global landscape that, in its own words, is becoming more contested and more technology-driven. So the plan is, at its heart, a strategy for resilience. When you hear these phrases on the slide, rising external volatility and enduring strategic competition, that's really just code for a simple goal: reduce your vulnerabilities. It's about building up economic and technological self-reliance to create a system that can withstand shocks from a really unpredictable world. But, and this is a key distinction, resilience does not mean isolation. As the slide shows, the push for self-reliance is paired with what the plan calls targeted opening up. China is still pursuing scientific and technological cooperation with over 160 countries. So the strategy isn't to close the door, but to build up its own foundational strength so it can engage with the world more on its own terms. And so, we come to the end of the blueprint, but not the end of the story. The plan charts a very clear and ambitious direction, but its success is absolutely not guaranteed. The final chapter is still being written, and it really hinges on execution and on navigating the huge challenges ahead. The mission is laid out in these pretty clear steps. It starts with a shift in mindset. It progresses through the actual creation of these new productive forces, and it all leads to this single big destination set for 2035: the basic realization of socialist modernization. What that basically means is becoming a fully developed, prosperous, and technologically advanced nation, all while maintaining its own unique political and social system. It's a goal that goes way beyond this single 5-year plan. Which leaves us with this final, essential question. The path is charted, the ambition is undeniable. This blueprint is designed to forge a more self-reliant, technologically advanced, and resilient nation. But will it actually succeed in an increasingly complex and contested world? The choices made in the next 5 years won't just shape one nation's future. They are going to define global industrial pathways, investment flows, and innovation networks for decades to come. And that concludes our deep dive into China's 2030 blueprint. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious.